The restaurant was packed, loud, and glamorous. But the only thing that mattered in that moment was the silence of a little boy. A small child, barely 6, sat at an expensive table with big brown eyes that seemed to shout what his voice couldn't. He stared at a plate of untouched food, his fingers trembling in his lap. Across from him sat a woman in an elegant black suit, sharp posture, and eyes full of unspoken worry. She was known as one of the most feared business leaders in the city, Eleonora Sterling, billionaire CEO of Sterling Tech. The world saw her as an unstoppable force. But there was a secret no one in the restaurant knew. The silent boy sitting beside her was her son, and he hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years. Before continuing, if you believe kindness deserves second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's spread stories that remind the world what compassion really means. As the boy sat quietly, his breaths uneasy, a young waiter named Daniel noticed him. Daniel was tall but looked tired beyond his age, with calloused hands and deep circles under his eyes as though every day weighed heavily on him. He had been working double shifts to survive, and there was something in his face that hinted he had learned life's lessons the hard way. Yet when he saw that little boy staring at the untouched food, his exhaustion softened. He recognized that look immediately, hunger disguised as indifference, pain pretending to be strength. It was the same expression he often saw on his own 8-year-old daughter, Lily. Daniel approached slowly, placing a warm plate of freshly cut pancakes shaped like a teddy bear in front of the boy. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He simply winked, as if saying that food was the one thing in life that should be shared, not earned through pain. The boy blinked in surprise, glanced at his mother, then timidly picked up a fork. His small hand trembled, but when he tasted the first bite, a spark of life returned to his eyes. For the first time that night, he smiled, soft, fragile, and pure. Eleonora watched silently. She was used to expensive meals, fancy people, polite but cold service. But she wasn't used to seeing someone treat her son like a child who mattered, instead of a billionaire's accessory. She didn't say a word, but she took notice. She watched how Daniel subtly checked if the boy liked the taste, how he quietly left napkins shaped like little boats by his plate, how he moved with a father's touch rather than a waiter's obligation. Something about him felt genuine. It reminded her of a life she rarely experienced anymore. Moments later, the restaurant's manager stormed across the floor with a furious expression. He was tall, rigid, and always eager to impress wealthy customers. Without warning, he yanked Daniel violently by the arm and dragged him near the corner. His voice rose angrily, accusing Daniel of giving food without permission, breaking protocol, and stealing from the restaurant. The entire dining area turned silent. The manager, desperate to show authority, publicly humiliated him, calling him irresponsible, careless, and unprofessional. Daniel's face turned pale, but his eyes burned with quiet dignity. He tried to explain, but the manager didn't care. With a cruel smirk, he fired him on the spot and ordered security to escort him out immediately. Daniel stood frozen, fired, just like that. No warning, no chance, no paycheck. He couldn't afford to lose this job. He had medical bills for his daughter, overdue rent, and no one else to rely on. His heart pounded, his thoughts raced, and panic rushed through him. But he took a deep breath, refusing to cry in front of strangers. As security approached, his eyes darted to the little boy at the table. The child stared back, frightened and confused, gripping the fork tightly like it was something precious being taken from him too. Daniel forced a weak smile for the boy, trying to protect him from guilt. Before the guards could escort him away, a voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. It wasn't loud, but it carried power that made everyone freeze. Eleonora Sterling stood from her table. Every phone lowered, every whisper stopped. Calm but cold as ice, she walked toward the scene. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a slow accusation. The manager straightened himself, thinking she would praise him for protecting the elite dining standard. Instead, she stared at him with thin, piercing eyes, as though she were dissecting a worthless object. Without looking away, she told him that the waiter had done nothing wrong. She described how her son had not eaten willingly for weeks, how no therapy or specialist could reach him. Yet today, without a word, a simple pancake had broken through his silence. She declared that if compassion was considered a crime in this restaurant, then it was the restaurant that was unfit for business. The manager stuttered, trying to apologize, but she silenced him with a single raise of her hand. Then she turned, faced Daniel, and asked him one question that would change both of their lives. How would he like to work somewhere his kindness could actually matter? Stunned, Daniel could barely respond. His heart pounded so loudly he could feel the echo in his ears. He didn't know whether to thank her, cry, or ask if this was real. The manager's face turned bright red, realizing he had just insulted the very person who could destroy his business. Eleonora, without ceremony, handed Daniel her business card and instructed security to escort the manager out. Instead, in seconds, roles reversed. The manager was thrown out, while Daniel, still trembling, remained standing inside. Days later, Daniel began working at Sterling Tech's headquarters, not as a waiter but as part of a new community program Eleonora was launching to support single parents. He was given fair pay, flexible hours, and full health benefits. For him and Lily, it felt unreal, like a miracle disguised in corporate paperwork. He didn't just find a job, he found opportunity. And more importantly, his daughter found medical support she desperately needed. As time passed, Daniel got to know Eleonora's silent son, whom he learned was named Henry. Henry's silence wasn't physical disability, it was trauma. He had lost his father in a tragic accident 2 years ago, and his voice disappeared with his grief. Eleonora, though strong and capable, struggled to reach him emotionally. She had power over corporations, but not over her child's pain. Daniel, through simple acts, small drawings, finger puppets, messy crafts, silly food shapes, slowly became a bridge between mother and son. One afternoon, as autumn sunlight streamed through the office daycare's windows, Daniel noticed Henry drawing a stick figure family. There were 3 figures, one holding hands with him on each side. Daniel's breath caught. He recognized the figures. Eleonora stood in the doorway, silently watching, swallowing emotion she didn't let the world see. For the first time since her husband's death, she felt hope instead of helplessness. Weeks turned into months, and a subtle transformation began. Henry started making small sounds while playing, then tiny words, soft, broken, but miraculous. The first time he whispered "Mama," Eleonora collapsed into quiet sobs, holding him like she would never let go again. Daniel stood nearby, pretending to busy himself, blinking back tears of his own. That single word felt like music after years of silence. A sound worth more than wealth, more than success, more than the entire business empire she owned. Their lives intertwined gently, without force, without expectations. Daniel became not just an employee, but a trusted presence. His daughter Lily often visited the daycare too, and she and Henry formed a strange, shy friendship built on art, snacks, and unspoken understanding. 2 children shaped by pain, learning to grow past it together. Eleonora, once cold and unreachable, found herself spending more time around the daycare than in boardrooms, drawn to the warmth that slowly replaced the grief inside her home. One evening, after picking up the children, she told Daniel that sometimes the greatest leaders were not those who commanded, but those who cared. She admitted she was terrified of failing her son emotionally. Daniel reminded her that love wasn't measured in perfection, but effort. She stared at him for a long moment, seeing not a waiter, not an employee, but a man who lived through storms and still chose kindness. A man who taught her that vulnerability wasn't weakness, but proof of love. Before the end of that year, Sterling Tech launched a nationwide program supporting workers with families, free childcare, medical benefits, flexible hours, educational support. It became one of the most respected corporate reforms in the country. And at the center of it all was the story of a mute boy, a struggling father, and a billionaire who finally understood that power meant nothing without compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep spreading kindness wherever we can. Before we finish, leave a comment with one word you believe the world needs more of today. It could be kindness, patience, love, respect, anything you want to see grow. To every parent who fights silently, to every child who struggles to speak, and to every worker who gives more than they get, you matter. Your compassion can change a life when you least expect it. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can echo louder than a voice that has been silent for years.